Hello, I'm Gareth.
And I'm Shane, and welcome to Building Business Resilience.
This is a podcast from Sanctuary Financial Planning, which helps growth business owners and social media influencers achieve financial independence.
We're two passionate financial planners on a mission to seek out new ideas, tips and tricks to help you take control of your finances and run better businesses.
We delve into the true goals and aspirations of our guests in order to provide you with some real value and positivity.
Nothing outrageous, clear, simple, solid financial solutions. We also have a YouTube series to accompany this, and details will be at the end of the show. So let's move on to our guest.
Welcome back to the Building Business Resilience Show. It's episode 13, and in today's show, we're going to be talking to Neil Fachie MBE about his early years discovering a congenital eye condition at 4 years old, his love of sport that took him from the highs of Beijing Paralympics to the job centre, and how a chance meeting at the velodrome introduced him to a new sport of cycling that allowed him to rise from adversity to now be the proud owner of 22 medals from major championships, of which 17 are gold and a double world record holder. Neil is Paralympian, world record holder, author and business coach. He's still very much involved in competitive cycling, along with running a business with his wife, Lora, providing elite performance coaching in the sporting and business world. So without much further ado, let's get started. Hi, Neil. How are you?
Yeah, good. Thank you. Thanks for having me on. It's good to be joining the show.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. We really appreciate it. So how's lockdown treating you? You're in Manchester, I think, yeah?
Yeah, it's been all right, to be honest. I mean, doing training, sort of full-time athlete's been interesting. Training from home has been a bit different, but it's been quite nice, actually, you know. When the weather's been good, it's been great. I've been out in the back garden doing gym sessions, and not so good now the storms have started hitting. I've had to improvise a little bit, kind of in and out between huge rain showers. But yeah, it's been good fun. It's been a challenge. I'm ready for it to end, I think.
Yeah, I think we all get in that kind of way now. You know, it's kind of we've been so lucky with the weather, though. I think that has made a huge difference. Could you imagine if it was like it is now? You know, because we're having serious flooding down here in Wales. Yeah,
I mean, that's it. I was just thinking that. I mean, everyone's mood has been so positive to start off with because the sun's out, and then as soon as it gets a bit miserable, I think everyone's dying for it all to be over. I was pretty miserable yesterday, I have to say. We had a huge flood. I couldn't do my gym. I had to do it in the house, and it was too hot, and I was grumpy. And yeah.
I think it's normal, though, for people to have bad days like that. It's ups and downs. It's hard going.
Definitely. It's been a challenge for sure. Yeah. And I'm lucky I've got a garden. I can do things out there and stuff. I know there's plenty of people that don't. And it depends who you live with, doesn't it? I mean, fortunately, I get on quite well with my wife. So for the most part, it's been quite good.
That helps.
Athlete as well, did I read?
Yeah, Laura's also on the paracycling team. She's reigning Paralympic champion in the pursuit and a 3-time world champion as well. So it's very competitive in our household.
I was going to say, does she train at home then as well with you?
Yeah. So she's much more endurance based. I'm more sprint based, and I've been kind of doing a bit more endurance training, and she's kind of been putting me to the sword somewhat. We do a lot of riding on like an online platform called Swift.
I signed up for it last week.
Awesome. Yeah, we'll see you on there then. It's
no,
really
you
cool.
won't. I'm 15 miles behind you.
Yeah. I'll wave as I go by, right? Trust me, as a sprinter, I'm not that great. And so you're essentially road riding in this virtual world, and it's really cool, but there's races and everything. So we've been doing a few races together, and it's been good. I did beat her once or twice, and that didn't go down well, so now I just let her win it.
So it basically is two of you with watt bikes in the house or something, and just basically spinning for X amount of hours a day, and that's your job at the moment.
Yeah, I mean,
wow.
Yeah. I mean, now you've summed it up. That is essentially it. Plus the odd gym session and eating. That's important too. But yeah, that's essentially been our last 12 weeks or so now.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm dying to get back to the velodrome and do some proper bike riding, some sprinting. You know, it's.
Do you have any plans to open the velodrome?
A few people have started to get back, but being that I ride on the tandem, socially distancing on a tandem is tricky.
I was going to say.
So that's it. You know, so it should be soon, but the other issues like getting there via public transport, things like that, I'm not that excited about using public transport yet, to be honest. So we'll see. I mean, the next few weeks are going to be important, but definitely there are measures now in place, and it's becoming a bit more realistic that it's going to happen soon. Yeah.
Do you think, like normally, I presume both of you in the house will have a fridge that will be, if you had something like Cribs coming around, and the old thing of MTV, and you look and there'll be all this healthy stuff. But because everything is almost closed down, the competition and stuff like that, does this give both of you a bit of time to go, Friday night, let's have some Maltesers or something like that instead of the normal eating healthy?
I mean, for a start, we always allowed ourselves the odd little treat. Laura's she's very into her nutrition. She runs a food blog as well. So I let her make a lot of the food decisions, and she makes me some really good meals and things. But going back to your point, we've used lockdown. This is very un-athlete, but you know what? Sometimes you got to. But we've used lockdown to learn about wine tasting. So a new skill I'm developing is essentially we've been following a course online where you try different wines along with a course. So we've had to invest in quite a lot of wine, and it's a sound investment, I have to say. So we've just been allowing ourselves the odd little wine tasting event now and again throughout the week, which is fine if you train hard. So that's why we're doing so much endurance work, just to make sure we kind of offset it a bit.
It's funny you should say that, because somebody sent me something earlier on today. I was just looking on the other screen here. There's a website called skinnybooze.co.uk that has reduced calorie, alcohol, wine and lagers and all that, but with the same taste, seemingly.
Oh, yeah. I don't believe that.
I was going to say I'm skeptical. I mean, from my experience of eating out and things like that, then generally the more fat or calories, generally the better the taste. That's sort of the rule, I think.
100%. Yeah, all these low fat, because butter's much better on a low fat spread, isn't it? Let's be real, and kind of like the way it's better for you anyway.
I wrote down something here. I said we already had an Olympic silver medalist on a few shows ago, in the form of Jamie Bulch. But you've gone one better. I wrote down we have an Olympic gold, 2 silvers, 5 Commonwealth golds, 12 gold and 3 silver on the track, and numerous world records. So basically, Jamie has been blown out of the water with all of that, and the podium seems to become your second home. It's unbelievable. If anyone does hear about our previous podcast, or if you listen to it, there is Jamie makes a joke about him and Ewan Thomas on the '96 Olympics, isn't it? When they were on the podium getting their medals, and Ewan was trying to chat up the flower lady. So that
sounds like Ewan. Actually, I've met him a couple of times, and I can believe that.
I forgot then, MBE in 2013 and best-selling author. Jeez, there's been little time for anything else, I can imagine then.
Yeah, I guess it's weird when you kind of look back at it, because I don't feel like I've done anything out of the ordinary, but yeah, it's been all right. Cycling's been pretty good to me, let's be honest. And the book part, the author bit, is something I never really anticipated, but that's something new to add to the list, and I'm quite proud of that one, I have to say.
We'll have to give that a plug later on. Go back then to the beginning. You have a congenital eye condition. Talk to us about your early years and growing up, and was sport important with you, or how did you get into doing sport? I know we'll come on to the cycling and that, because there's a bit before that, but...
Yeah, so going back to the eye condition, I mean, I was diagnosed at the age of 4, and actually, I'll talk you through the day that happened. Was Christmas Day, because I remember it quite vividly. It's probably my first memory, to be honest. I was at my grand's house with the kind of wider family, and it was just coming down dark outside, which it does up in Aberdeen, where I'm from, in the northeast of Scotland, incredibly early in winter. So, but we thought we'd go out and play in the back garden, and being competitive as I always have been, I just ran as fast as I could, wanted to beat all my cousins out into the back garden, and made my way out as quick as I could. I just ran straight into the washing line pole that was cemented into the ground. And I was also a bit confused and upset, and my cousins kind of took me back into my mum, and I got a big hug, and it was all fine. But then my mum turned to my dad and said, "Do you think he's got it?" And my dad said, "Yeah, I think he's got it." And I'm sitting there at the age of 4, kind of thinking, well, what is it? What have I got? And I was terrified, what's wrong with me? And then later that week, I was diagnosed with this eye condition, RP, retinitis pigmentosa, which was kind of a relief, because it it wasn't something that, I had this huge fear that something terrible was going to happen to me. But, I got this condition from my mum, and I like to thank her for it now and again, just to just to make her feel good. But yeah, it's interesting. So it degenerates over time. So when I was young, my eyesight was pretty good, bar not seeing well in low level lighting. But, my central vision and everything was pretty good, and you would never really know I had a disability. And truth was, my mum was very much from the generation of you hide your disability. And that kind of rubbed off on me a lot. So I never told anyone, any of my friends or anything, that I had a problem in my eyes, which was fine when I was younger. But as I kind of got a bit older, going through school, my eyesight gradually got worse and worse. So I had to sit nearer the board, then started to have to get larger text print to read and for sitting exams and things like that. And so it stopped being a secret then, really, although I still didn't really talk about it. But the worst part was that because I couldn't see very well when it was dark, I wasn't going out and socializing with friends. So particularly when you start to hit your teenage years, people are asking if you want to come out, you want to go and hang out or whatever. And I'd always have an excuse for why I couldn't. And, people stop asking after a while. So that kind of social circle really closed in. But that's where sport was really beneficial for me. And I started athletics at the age of 10. And just that freedom of running as fast as you can, going as fast as you can, I just fell in love with that straight away. And it just became a hobby that I loved. And it really helped me develop my kind of social skills. And, I wasn't doing it in a parasport sense. I was just able-bodied at my local athletics club training. And I wasn't particularly good either, if I'm honest. For many years, I was finishing last in almost every race I did. But just that love of pushing yourself, trying to better yourself, and that world away from school as well was so great. So yeah, I was always very sporty, and athletics was my first love and my first passion, particularly sprinting 100 and 200 meters. And
that brought you on then to getting to the Paras and making Beijing in 2008?
2008, yeah. So it wasn't until in my early 20s when my eyesight started to get a bit worse that someone within athletics kind of suggested, like, have you thought about the Paralympics? And I always assumed my eyesight was too good for some reason to be considered. I guess growing up with it, I'm accustomed to it. I don't really know what other people see. So I just thought, my eyesight's not that bad. But I went and got tested and turned out, I could have been doing this all along. My eyesight was far worse than I realized. And suddenly that became an option. And I started to progress quite a lot in the sport, and I was starting to get to a decent level. And obviously when the parasport world opened up, then it was an opportunity. And in UK athletics, I got in touch with them, and they seemed interested, and I made it onto a development squad with them. And ultimately, as you say, that led to going to Beijing in 2008, where I was probably the last man to make the team, to be honest. I kind of made it by skin of my teeth. I got the qualifying time with 1 week left on the qualifying period, so it was really tight. But I made it there, and that was when I just fell in love with the Paralympics. And at that point, parasport, disability sport, wasn't really covered much in the UK or worldwide. But you had a few stars like Tanya Gray-Thompson, people like that who you're aware of, but that was it really. So I never really knew how big the Paralympics were till I arrived in Beijing and walked into the athletes' village where we all stay before and during the games, and just struck by the absolute magnitude of it all. Like, firstly, you've got athletes from essentially everywhere on earth, all with different disabilities, and this ridiculously diverse village where we're all crammed in together. And it's just like nothing else I'd ever experienced in my life. It just instantly fell in love with it. And then you had competing in venues where I was used to competing in tiny little stadiums with the only people that were there were the other athletes or a few friends and family, to competing in a 90,000 seater stadium was just like jaw-droppingly huge for me. So I just completely fell in love with the Paralympic Games. And for me, it was, I was aware that the London Games were just 4 years away at that point. And I thought, well, if you love this experience, then a home games is going to be incredible. Not many athletes get that opportunity. And that became my target then, was I just need to make it to London. That's got to be the goal.
Yeah.
So at Beijing itself, I finished 9th in both my events, top 8 making the final, which wasn't great, but it was decent. I was an okay level, but if I was going to make it to London, I knew I had to go back and really push on and take it to another level. So I was really motivated, and I got home, and then 2 weeks later, I got a phone call from my manager at UK Athletics, and she said to me, "We don't think you've got the potential to make it to London, and we're terminating your contract with immediate effect."
Wow.
And that was it, just done. Dream was over. And, I was, at that point, I was angry with everyone else. I blamed everyone else for it. I felt like they didn't really see the potential in me. And it took a while for me to kind of get over. I think it was almost like grief to an extent, where I was grieving for this dream that had just gone from under my feet. And I started to have to apply for jobs and things because I didn't have any income or anything. But I couldn't get a job at all. And I was down the job centre applying to sign on, and I was applying for jobs every week and getting nothing. And just suddenly I'd gone from having this huge dream to being unemployed and with this disability that seemed to be affecting my working life and kind of no hope really. I didn't see any way back at that point.
Wow. Dark days. Wow. So what decided then to make the transition or the adaptation to the bike?
Yeah, so like I say, it wasn't an instant thing that just as soon as I lost my funding, that was it. I was on the hunt for the next thing, and it took a few months really to pick myself up. I was definitely going through a state of depression where I wasn't sad about it. I was just in that real numbness phase where I didn't really care about anything. But I think that spark of having London 2012 in my head was still there. And just one morning I woke up, and for some reason, it just pinged in my head and got through that kind of numbness. And I thought, well, what have you got to lose? You might as well try and make it to London in some way you can. And kind of thought, well, what are your options here? And I thought, well, athletics seemed to be a closed door. I could go back and try again, but I kind of knew I sort of reached my best. I'd been doing it for about 15 years, and you almost reached that plateau where I didn't see how I could improve. So I thought, well, maybe there's another sport for me. And I decided to get out of bed, go and research every sport for the visually impaired at the London Paralympics, and decided I was just going to try every single one till I found one I was good enough at that I might be considered a possible to make it to London in a few years' time. And I've always been a lifelong fan of cycling, so that was a sport that was near the top of my list. And then they did an incredibly successful both Olympics and Paralympics in 2008, where they won almost everything. So they were very much in the public eye as well. And I thought, well, you might as well give that a shot first. So rather than getting in touch with the team, I was quite a shy person. I didn't really see why I deserved a chance. I was still feeling quite low about myself, so my self-esteem was low. So I didn't get in touch with the GB team and say, look, I'm trying out, is there a place for me? Because I didn't think I deserved that. So I got in touch with the velodrome at Manchester, the National Cycling Centre, and said, I want to give it a try. How do I get on the velodrome? And they said, we've got these things called taster sessions where anyone can come along and have a go. And so I ended up signing up for one of these sessions, and then I got off the phone and I realized that I hadn't told them I couldn't see very well, and I thought, should I let them know? And I thought, well, they might not give you a shot, so maybe just leave it. So I turned up, and I still didn't tell anyone, and I got on a solo bike. I rode around the track and I wobbled my way around, but I kept away from everyone else because I didn't want to ride too close to anyone in case I caused them any issues. But I enjoyed it. I finished the session, didn't fall off or anything, which was a real plus point. And then I was just getting ready to leave because, I'd done my taster session and that was it. But I had my bag from the Beijing Games on my back. I was still living on former glories. So I was walking past a guy who was warming up for the next session, which happened to be a GB cycling session. And he saw my bag and he got talking to me about Beijing. And I got speaking to him and he told me he'd been to the Olympics and won a silver in Sydney in cycling. And he said, I've just moved from the Olympic team to the Paralympic team. And, I'm now what's known as a pilot. I ride on the front of a tandem. I need a visually impaired guy to go on the back. Do you happen to know anyone? And I said, well, yeah, since you mentioned it, I might know a guy. Yeah. Wow. I might be interested. And just from there, just that moment of being in the right place at the right time was so important. And he helped fast track, get me in touch with the right people, get me to a trial day. And, ultimately it turned out that cycling was a sport I was probably meant to be doing all along. I just hadn't tried. And yeah, it was just an incredible moment that led me to cycling. And,
wow.
And you've kind of alluded to the rest being history, so to speak.
Wow, that's amazing. That kind of being in the right place at the right time, I guess.
Yeah, and I kind of look back and I think it was so out of character for me to even pick up the phone in the first place to call the velodrome. I was so shy. I still hate making phone calls, so I'd never do it. I don't know what possessed me to do it that day and make the decision to travel from Aberdeen in the northeast of Scotland all the way down to Manchester on my own, which is like 78 hours on the train. It was just so unlike myself, but it was just putting myself in. I guess because I'd hit such a low, maybe I just disrupted my normal way of thinking and thought, let's just try something new, and found myself there. And I guess it was meant to be, which is, it just kind of shows you if you're willing to put yourself out there, who knows what can happen.
Wow. So the thing that happened in Beijing, where you were in a nice way dumped and you basically went off the wagon, and what there was no healthy eating. Was there, there was a period of time where feeling sorry for yourself, and all during this time, the clock was counting down for all of these other athletes around the world to London. So the clock almost starts counting down from the moment that the flame is extinguished in one Olympics, and you've already lost out in a period of time where you're feeling sorry for yourself, where you're not eating healthy, where you're not training. In fact, you don't even know what sport it is, to getting a sport, training for it, becoming one of the best in the world and winning medals at it. Christ, there must be a massive mental strength there to be able to do that, because surely everyone else they come home from an Olympics or a World Championships and they may have a few days off, whatever, but they're back in the training regime again. How long was it before you started the clock ticking from going, right, I'm on this train now to get to London? Yeah,
I mean, so although that was towards the end of 2008, probably around October. So it wasn't too long after the games, about 2 months after the games, that I went down and did that taster session. But things didn't really happen as quick as I'd like them. So, after meeting with Craig, who was the guy who got me in touch with the right people, I headed back up to Aberdeen. As you say, the diet was terrible. I didn't hear anything for a long time, and it wasn't really till start of 2009 that I started hearing there might be a trial coming up soon, but everything just seemed so slow and I just didn't really have the motivation. So I was pretty badly out of shape, and it wasn't till sort of March, April time in 2009 that I went through the trial process. I got accepted by British Cycling, and at that point they were just creating the development squad for the Paralympic team. They'd had that immensely successful games in Beijing, and they had this group of elite athletes who were performing well, and then they didn't really have anything below it. So that's when they were just starting to build that program. And I guess it was just around April that I started on that, and that would be when I kind of went back to full-time training. And obviously I had a lot of time to make up for. I mean, I'd gained I'm quite a small guy, so I usually sit around 60 kilograms my weight, and I was up to about 65, so it was quite a big chunk of extra weight, almost 10% extra body weight that was just fat, to be honest, from a terrible diet. So the first part was lose weight and then try and learn the sport, try and learn how to train. And yeah, it was a big commitment, and I knew if I was going to do it, I had to commit big to it. And so I decided at the start of June in 2009 that I needed to move to Manchester and be around the National Cycling Centre to make use of the facilities, all the experts and things. But they were paying me £1,000 for my whole year. So I had a little bit of savings, and my parents were helping out, but I essentially decided I'm going to move to Manchester. I'll rent a flat with another guy in the team. And I essentially had about 6 months I could survive financially before it was done. So I had this sort of ticking clock until I needed to make a big enough impression to get a decent level of funding, or I was going back to live with mum and dad, which, is quite a motivational tool of, I just can't go back to that. I associated that world with that level of depression, that being in that terrible place. So that was hugely motivational. That, you know, I felt like it was my last opportunity, my last chance to do something. And so I just, like I said, moved to Manchester, and my days were essentially train, which, because it was a new sport, was just exhausting. Like I was still had an element of fitness from athletics, but it's different in a different sport. It did fare me well, but I just struggled. So I'd train, I'd come back to the flat and just, you know, completely collapse on the sofa, barely have the energy to cook a meal, and then go to bed. And that was it. Start again the next day. And that was essentially it for 5-6 months. But we were lucky. There was a World Championships at the end of 2009. And the guy who was the Paralympic champion in my event had decided he wanted to take that year out of sport. He was still training, but he didn't want to compete. So there was an open spot available for a visually impaired rider to ride at the World Champs for our team. And there was 2 of us vying for that place. So that became my big drive through the summer. It's just that was the opportunity. If I could get on the team for that, then, you know, I'd probably get some level of funding. And I just worked to the absolute bone. And then November that year, the World Champs came around. I got selected for it. And just as we were approaching the championships, like, my performance started going through the roof, and we were kind of getting really excited, like, wow, we're on to something here. And at the World Champs, we came along and somehow came away with 2 gold medals and broke 2 world records, like, literally in the space of a year. It was in November, so I lost my funding in September. November the following year, became a double world champion in a different sport, which was astronomically quicker than I ever imagined. My goal was to make it just to the London Games. Somehow it wasn't to be leading the world after a year in a sport. And yeah, I mean, obviously a lot of the training I'd done in athletics had helped me. But my physique just sort of suits cycling as well. So, you know, it was almost just meant to be. And yeah, it was mind blowing. So suddenly there I was, best in the world at my event, and just no way of computing like how I'd made that transformation. But it was just, as you say, I mean, it was pretty strong-willed. There was an element of mental toughness, but I do look back and think that I was actually quite weak mentally, to be honest. But it was just, I was able to, despite all that, put myself in the right place and do the work, despite the fact I felt so self-conscious and so vulnerable at times. But when you get the result, it's funny how your opinion of yourself changes as well. So it was a big shift at that point.
Yeah, that's massive. You know, I think you obviously, I guess, found yourself in a comfortable place, didn't you, with the cycling, and that allowed you to go all in and get to where you got yourself to. That's brilliant. You know, to go from losing your funding to, you know, the heights you got to there, and I guess then the funding came back, and which is the big thing.
Yeah, and that's when it became, you know, I even got a surprise. I remember when I got the phone call about my funding, and although I'd become double world champion and double world record holder, to me, I didn't really believe they'd necessarily want me for some reason. I still mentally didn't feel that worthy of being on the program. But I got a phone call from my manager at British Cycling. He said, "Oh, you know, you're on the top level of funding now." And I said, "Oh, are you sure? Like, why?" And he said, "Well, you know, you just became a double world champion and you've gone quicker than anyone else has ever gone in history. Of course you're on the top level of funding." And it just did not compute. But obviously once that phone call was over, I did a huge happy dance of running around the flat and celebrating. Obviously called my parents and said, "I'm not coming home. I'm staying put." But thanks for all your help. I'm fine now. So yeah, I mean, there was a huge shift, and that just allowed me then to kind of refocus and not have that pressure of, I have to do this for my livelihood. You know, it was my last chance, and it was great to then relax. But to be honest, I did have a slightly poor year the following year, because I think I relaxed too much almost and got too comfortable with it. And that was another lesson, that you just can't do that in sport. As soon as you ease up at all, then someone else comes along and takes your place.
I got to pick up on something you said a few moments ago about you didn't think you were mentally strong at that, but surely there has to be a mental strength and a resilience there to be, you know, down in the dumps after being having your funding taken away, to being able to adapt that quickly and not just try something else, but that quickly become the best that there ever has been on the planet at that thing. And there's been a lot of people on this planet, trying the same sport as you. So I think there has to be a mental strength or a resilience there to do something like that. But we ask a lot of people that come on there. There has been dark days and there's been bad days. As a sports person, how do you park those bad days and leave them there and adapting and get on and wake up the next day and be ready to go at it again and forget about that bad day?
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, I think to those who aren't involved in sport, often you see these sport stars as being these hugely mental tough individuals. So I mean, I think back to when I was growing up and I looked on the Olympians at the time who were winning, like Chris Hoy, Steve Redgrave, Kelly Holmes, all those sort of individuals. And they almost seem like these hugely resilient, almost Greek gods that you look up to and you just think, wow, they're on a different level to us mere mortals. And it's not until you get involved in sport that you do realize that there is a lot of mental weakness there, where you have the same ups and downs as everyone else. And some athletes I've known have been some of the most neurotic and almost unstable people I've ever met, where you see them in training when they've had a bad day, and you can get really down about it, especially if it's kind of all encompassing. It's your life, your sport. Then one bad training session can almost be the end of the world to you. So, athletes aren't necessarily these hugely robust people, but the best athletes always find a way to get the job done regardless. And I think that's where the key is, that having some sort of mental tool or sort of way that you work that ensures, regardless of what mood you're in, you're still going to perform, you're still going to train hard, and you're still going to find yourself on that start line or walking onto the pitch, whatever it might be, and performing to your best. And I think that's something I learned to develop, really. And I'm not sure how I developed it, but kind of looking back, I can see now what it was. And the first point really is having that big goal or target in mind. And for me, obviously, that was London 2012, through that period where I had this huge goal that I was aiming towards, and that was always in the back of my head. So when I started cycling and, I was finding the training incredibly tough, and I'd wake up in the morning and look at my training program and genuinely just think, oh, I can't even begin to face this again. I'm in so much pain, and I just, there's no way I can perform like I did yesterday. And at that point, it'd be really easy just to take your foot off the gas. You can still train hard, but maybe not commit everything to it. But having that big goal in the back of your head that you can call upon always helps you find that extra 1 or 2% that you need to perform at your absolute best. And I'd often say to myself, like, literally just say the phrase London 2012 in my head as I was doing those efforts. And that was the big goal. Like, I've got to get there somehow. And it's amazing that extra bit you can find in yourself when you've got that motivation to do it. So I think that's what a lot of athletes probably do. And it's so important to have that big cause, because your motivation comes and goes, and it does for everyone, whether you're sport or whatever you do. Some days you fancy it and you're up for it, and the next day you're just not. You wake up and it's so easy just to go through the motions. But if you want to be number one, you just can't do that. So yeah, I think it's just a case of learning how to put those days behind you and still focus on that big bright light, and perform regardless. And it's easier said than done, but it's something I think I've developed over the years.
Yeah. Is it a thing that the motivation factor was originally, I don't want to go home, and then once that box was ticked, it was London 2012. So there's always been almost a goal to set for yourself for motivation, and it's touching area. Was it Sir Steve Redgrave that said, before there was times when he was on the rower and he'd be rowing and he might have X amount of kilometres or whatever still to go, and he was almost counting the rows in fives and that, because to him he couldn't do any more, especially, was it diabetes he had, I think, was it? Or
yeah, that's right, yeah.
And sometimes he'd fall off the rower going, there's no way I can do another 10 minutes of this, let's count 10 seconds or 10 rows. So I suppose you touched on it there. There's been days when, you can't get on the bike, but you just have to. And those little micro actions or 1% increases on a regular basis will get you to the top or retain you at the top.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point, because I've realized, again, looking back, that how incredibly good I've become over the years at like working out percentages and fractions in my head during training rides, like how far complete you are through a session. And you almost create those little goals as you're going through. So if I've got 20 efforts and I'm kind of 8 efforts in, that's 8/20 the way there. Okay, that's great. When you get to 10, that's halfway there. That's a huge goal. When I'm at 2/3 complete, when I'm at 3/4 complete, and it's almost like a computer game where you see that progress bar ticking up, and it just inspires you to keep going. So I'm constantly doing that, where I'm just creating these little goals, and I even do it on endurance rides on the bike, where I'm working out what my average speed is, just to see, can I get it to this speed instead? And you just find these little wins all over the place that, while you're doing it, it kind of tricks your mind into pushing hard. But sometimes you've got to figure those things out, because when you are completely on the limit, your mind, what is constantly, that survival part of your brain is telling you, just stop. You don't need to do this. Just stop pedaling. It'll all be over. And you've got to beat that somehow. You've got to win. So that's where I use all these little tricks, like Steve suggests, where you're just getting these small little goals. And it's amazing how you can trick yourself into completing a session. And then you feel so good about yourself, the fact you managed to push yourself all that way. I mean, of course, the physical exhaustion is the counter side to that works against you a bit. But that feeling of, I know I've worked as hard as I can. That's pretty cool to finish your day and know that. And then you've got to do it again the next day, of course.
Yeah, I find it fascinating, that ability of people to push themselves past that limit. When you get into that red line, and like you say, you don't think you've got any more in the tank to go, but you just have that ability to push yourself through. Where I think many times, I guess I'm not really competing for anything. I'll just I'll just stop. It's fine. But but if you don't push past that, you're never going to reach the heights that you've got to. You.
Yeah, exactly. And most people don't have any idea what they're physically capable of. And there's still times when I'm competing or when I'm training, some days I will finish and I'll know that I did hold something back without meaning to. Like, you're constantly, subconsciously, you're trying to protect yourself and not push through. So it's so hard to just cross that line and find a way to do it. But when you do and you realize what you are actually capable of, it's pretty special. Like, there's a whole level of performance in there that most people probably have never accessed. But yeah, if you want to be number one, then there are other people who have done it, and you're going to have to find a way to get there, which is, it is a tough challenge. And I think that's where, often it's said at the highest level, it's a mental battle more than physical ability that ends up winning. And that's probably why. Yeah.
Do you think, though, and I suppose you can use this in a business sense as well, or in the business world, where let's use very simple ideas. Somebody might go on a watt bike and they may say, right, I'm going to go on, I haven't been on it in weeks, and I'm going to do an hour. I'm going to do 60 minutes. And after 40, they're absolutely in bits and they just finish and they feel like a failure. Whereas if they say, let's do 30 minutes today, and tomorrow I'm going to do 31 minutes. And you know what? I'm going to wait off the next day, but the following day I'm going to do 32 minutes and build those, the resistance up. Because that's what you have, I presume, in your world, where it's a constant micro increase on a regular basis and you have it planned out. Whereas with us normal Joe Publics, you set yourself a goal. It's not achievable because you're not ready for it. Then you give up because you're a failure and you may not go back to it again. And that's what maybe a lot of people do in businesses, where they need to set a realistic goal, but then do the micro actions of the 1% increase every week or whatever. And I suppose you can bring that into a business world.
Yeah, totally. And that's where, we very much strategize for success. So every 4 years, I sit down at the start of that cycle, the Olympic or Paralympic cycle, that we all sit down. As you said before, you finish one Paralympic game. So I finished my race in London already. I'm thinking, right, what 4 years is the next one? And that's what we start working towards. So I'll sit down with my team and we'll say, right, what time do we think it's going to take to win in 4 years, which, for this cycle, it was Tokyo, which has been delayed. But so we actually sat down, we set a time that we thought, right, we're going to have to go this quick, because sport always progresses, like everything, like business as well. Things are always moving forwards. So what do we need to do in order to get that achievement? And then you kind of work yourself back from there over a 4-year period, and you think, well, that seems almost unachievable. I can't, I'm pushing as hard as I can now, and I'm not going anywhere near that quick. How on earth are we ever going to get there? And it's just too big. It's too much for you to compute. So you have to break it down into much smaller parts and kind of work your way back from there. And it comes all the way back to these sort of training blocks that I'll do that might be about 8 weeks long. So I've broken the event down. I realized areas I need to improve in if I want to go quicker. I worked out how I go about doing that, whether it's lifting more weights in the gym, whether it's doing different things on the bike. And I have these training blocks then that are 8 weeks long, focusing on one key area each time. And I'll just set myself a few targets. In this 8-week block, I aim to lift this weight X amount of times. I aim to do an average power for a minute of this. And I have these goals set out that are always written on my phone as well, so I can take a look at them and check. And I've got 8 weeks to do it as well, which you kind of said, a lot of people will just kind of think, oh, set this target, which is unrealistic. I don't make it. I failed. I'm not good enough at this. Whereas the reality is you have to build up to everything. So I've got 8 weeks to try and hit these targets. I then look at, well, day one, I'm not going to break it now, but I've got time to get there. So I'm building up, as you say, improving just a little bit every day. I'm resting when I need to as well, because it's very easy to overtrain, or in a business sense, to overwork and exhaust yourself, and then performance just plummets and goes through the floor. But you've just got these targets in mind that you're working towards, but you allow yourself the time to get there. And even if you don't quite make it, you'll find that you've improved vastly from where you started out. And if you take a look back at where you've come, you think, well, at least I've improved. I've learned a few lessons about maybe I couldn't quite make this 8-week block, but now I've got another 8-week block. I could set that goal again. And just constantly setting yourself these little challenges to improve, and allowing yourself the time to get there as well, as you say, and allowing yourself to fail, because that's when we kind of learn where your limits are and how you can improve. And you don't tend to beat yourself up the same as if you just try one day and don't make it. You're allowing yourself time to see where what the failure means and where those improvements could be made. So yeah, I mean, it's a much more structured way of doing it. And it's not easy to look over a 4-year cycle and plan it out by any means. And of course it adapts, it evolves over time massively. And to be honest, the time we set that we thought was going to win in Tokyo, we've smashed through that, and we're going quicker already. And I think you're going to have to go significantly quicker than that. So, things are always moving forward, and you'll be surprised what you can achieve with that sort of process of just that little improvement every single day in lots of different areas can just add up to this huge gain down the line. And it's just playing the long game rather than trying to get it all done in one day.
Wow.
Yeah.
Sorry, go on.
Yeah, I think that's interesting, because I think that's where a lot of people do struggle and fail, isn't it? Because they set unrealistic goals and expect it to be achieved in such a short period. Everyone wants it now, don't they? Yeah. And we're in a world of everything fast food, fast fashion. We can order things and get it delivered the same day now. But I think when you break things down in business, sport, and anything like that, I think you've got to try and remember it's the long game. We've got a 5-year plan for the kind of business that we're in, and we're probably 4.5 years into that, and we have to remind ourselves that Rome wasn't built in a day. We've got to get the end goal in mind, and let's work our way back, and let's work. Shane always uses the word micro actions, and that's what we've got to do.
It's amazing that we're chatting about somebody in sport, and people that come into us talking about, they may come in our finance company about retirement and stuff like that, and we're using probably just different wordings of, we're using financial forecasting to plot something that is X amount of time in the future that we're looking to achieve through assumptions, but we're reviewing it on a specific period to see how we're getting along with that end goal in mind, knowing that there will be patches of peaks and troughs along the way, And the only thing that we do know is that the assumptions are never correct, and we have to make changes or adapt the plan on a regular basis once we have the previous information, or if anything does change, to try and hit that goal that might be X amount of years down the line. So exactly like you're doing in the world of sport.
Oh, totally. And yeah, you're right. Having that ability to be agile and adaptable when things do come up. I mean, and they always do, don't they? Both. I mean, obviously there's been the huge issue of coronavirus now, which has affected so many things, but in a sporting sense, it's injury, it could be anything. You've always got to be adaptable, but that's why I always kind of say have a strategy rather than a plan. That's something that you know what the goal is, but you don't necessarily know exactly how you're going to get there, and that will shift over time. I mean, there's always improvements. We have improvements in technology, again, both business and sport. You have all sorts of things coming in, and you just got to be open to not being too rigid and just sticking to that plan you set X amount of years ago, because it ultimately never works in the end. So it's really cool to hear that we do have the same approach in very different worlds,
Yeah. Does the fact that a disease or a virus, that it knocks all of your training pattern that you've been doing for 3.5 odd years plus, not fry your head? Or is it the adaptation to go, right, it's not going to happen, we can sit down and moan about it, or do loads of wine tasting, or we can just basically plan when it's going to happen and restructure our end goal, and put our micro actions in place against going forward, and just get sorry about the pun, get back on the bike.
Yeah. So I mean, initially, Tokyo Paralympics were postponed this year and are hopefully going ahead next year. And I was devastated, to be honest, because I won the world title earlier this year in the event that we're doing at the Paralympics. So I'm world number one currently in that event, and I'm ready to go. I know I'd race tomorrow. I want to do it sooner rather than later when I know I'm ahead of the game. I don't want to give them all a chance to catch me up. So an extra year in sport and anything is huge. That kind of time, lots can change. So I'm disappointed. But then again, when I've had time to think about it, I think, well, okay, we've got sort of been gifted an extra year in the cycle. What are we going to do with that? I'm at this point, I should be well, yeah, there is that. And I have to say that wasn't agreed with my coach. But, sometimes you have to do other things. So wine tasting was a real winner in that respect. But during lockdown, I decided to use the time to kind of build my endurance side up a little bit, which is something I'd kind of let go a little bit in recent times. And at this phase, I should have been, if I was racing this year and at the games at the end of August, I'd be very much in that kind of final sharpening up sort of phase where I'm getting my powers up, the speeds up. But instead I had an opportunity. So yeah, I spent a lot of lockdown building up my endurance, and now I'm, far fitter than I've ever been. So I can now cope with harder training sessions based on that fitness, which means now when I'm just transitioning now back into more sprint-based training, it kind of sets me in a much better position than I would have been otherwise. So I kind of see it as an opportunity that probably by next year we'll be going even quicker than we would have done this year. I just got to make sure that I'm still ahead of the rest of the world, which, they all see this as an opportunity as well, I'm sure. So it's really interesting. And we've definitely had to adapt, but it's definitely an opportunity, and there's a lot of thought going into our event that we wouldn't have had time to delve into as well. I've been speaking about with my coach, where I think there are small areas of gains that we can still make that we possibly overlooked beforehand, or we just didn't have the time to look. You say no stone unturned, but obviously you've got your priorities, and now we've got that extra chance. So yeah, it's not ideal and it is a setback, but I guess time will tell next year whether I deliver the performance or not, whether it's been good for me or not. But at this point, I'm very hopeful.
What does the future hold then after this? And is this the last Olympics? And in terms of, I know we'll touch on the book now and we'll wrap up, but what's the plan going forward for you?
Yeah, it's, I'm getting to that age where almost every interview I do people, sport-based interview, people ask, "Oh, well, is it time? Is it time to call it a day?"
All right.
I think it's fine. I'm very used to it. I'm not getting any younger, I'm going to be honest. So it's fine. And yeah, I've obviously had to start planning for the future. Sport doesn't last forever. We're very aware. And it was a few years ago when I had a bit of a downturn in form. It was at the Rio Games, actually, where I came away with a silver medal, and I went in as huge, overwhelming favourite to win, but I didn't. And I thought that was the end of my career coming at that point. That I started to think, well, I need another source of income because I've got a mortgage to pay, and all I've ever done is sport, and I couldn't really see what the future was. So I spent a bit of time kind of reflecting on things I'd learned over the years and wondered what I had to offer the world, and I realised that I'd picked up loads of skills. I'd learned how to become the best in the world at something. I'd learned how to stay there for the best part of a decade. Yeah, it'd be over a decade now. And, we've kind of alluded to a lot of the points in this podcast about that kind of mental aspect, the resilience, the toughness to perform at the highest level and ultimately to perform in those extreme pressure situations like at London 2012 when you've got a home crowd. It's just massive. So I realized I had these skills, and then I realized that, well, it's something I can offer the world. And it doesn't just apply to sport, but these things apply to business, to any walk of life, really. And I thought, it's something I could share with everyone. And that's when I formed my company, LNF Coaching, which, we decided to go down the route of working with businesses, teams that are performing well, but want to find that extra level of performance. And I just find that crossover of business and sport really exciting. So that adrenaline rush of training and being the best you can and competing is huge for me. And I kind of see that in the business world as well, where people are competing against one another to try and be the best. And I just want to be involved in that kind of world. So yeah, I formed this business and decided to write a book about it, about these crossovers between business and sport and how you get the most out of yourself on a day-to-day basis. And that's now kind of in what I'm looking to do in the future. I've still possibly got a few more races in me, and there's the lure of the Commonwealth Games for Team Scotland in Birmingham in 2022, which I might still do. Now, I'm not saying yes or no to anything at this stage, but there is the possibility if I was to go there and win 2 gold medals that I'd be the most successful athlete of all time for Scotland at the Commonwealth Games, which is a pretty big draw. So I don't know. We'll see where I'm at, but at least now I've got something I can fall back on, and I've still got an exciting world to look forward to in the future, even when cycling is done, which I feel quite lucky to be in, because I know a lot of sports stars who get to that point and either have to retire or do and haven't thought about their future, and it can be quite a challenging few years just to figure out what it is you want to do.
And the book went to the top of the list on Amazon when it was released recently.
Yeah, it was quite mind-blowing actually, just to get that kind of feedback. You spend a long time writing a book, and I'd never appreciated how long it would take me. And it was 2 years from the start of planning to actual publication. But you spend so much time involved in it yourself that I got to the point where I hated it, to be honest. It was just this piece of work that was always there. And I'd read it so many times that I just thought it wasn't any good. And then it went out there, and I started getting feedback from people about how much they enjoyed it and couldn't put it down. And it's just so nice to hear, that your message is being received by people. And I had a really cool message from a guy just the other day who said he's just recovering from cancer treatment, and he's using it as a way to kind of pick himself back up. And I thought, oh, that's just so rewarding. I never ever considered that would be a thing. I'm just doing this book because I wanted to get my message out, and yeah, just to get that sort of feedback was awesome. So hopefully I can continue to spread the message, and yeah, it's out there, and yeah, it's doing good things for me, which is really cool.
Brilliant. We'll put that in at the end of the show notes, and hopefully people will jump on Amazon and increase the sales on that.
Yeah, I'd appreciate that.
Brilliant. I think we've probably run over today on that. Apologies, but we probably could do another hour or two of chatting. It's really, really fun listening to all the stories, and probably didn't spend enough time on most of the things, but so be it. That's the nature of podcasts and all that. But no, thank you very much for today. It's much appreciated, and we'll look forward to cheering you on in the next couple of World Championships, maybe Commonwealth Games, and definitely Olympics.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me on. And I do love to talk, so apologies for taking up all your time today.
Oh, no, it was great. We really appreciate it.
That was a great chat with Neil. Somehow I think the end of his medal collections is a long way off yet. There's going to be many more medals to wrap around his neck over the coming years. Head over to our website, www.sanfp.co.uk, to learn more about us and our journey. That's it for this episode. Next, we're talking all things behaviour, sketch guy and financial planning with Carl Richards. You can hear that wherever you get your podcasts. Plus, don't forget to click subscribe to get all the latest episodes as soon as they arrive. Also, if you're enjoying the series, please do leave us some feedback with a quick review, as it helps us grow and ensure that we are giving our audience the best experience. Until next time, thanks for listening.